Welcome back to Battleship Cove and Preserving the Fleet. I'm Tom Lowney. I'll be your host for this episode. We're going to be showing you a little something special that we've done, that we've worked together as a team, as it's becoming quite an important project, not just for us, but other ships in the fleet of the museums around the country and possibly the world. So we're taking on a project to restore space that we've already talked about, and we're in here in a passageway which is from the officer's country coming up to the O2 level, and this is to show you kind of what we started with and what we're still working on, because every passageway, space, berthing compartment, control space has to be restored. So this is the kind of conditions of what it looks like. The different, all these colors and everything. We had a paint locker here. This was a former 40mm magazine that we use now as a paint locker because it's basically a magazine, so we can isolate it, and in case a fire ever happens or anything, we can keep it safe. But coming out here, we stage paint and take it out to restore the ship. But as it is now, we're getting ready to restore this because this was actually part of a repair locker in our other series. This would be for repair 1 for electronic equipment and so forth throughout the upper parts of the ship. But we'll eventually get this all set up back. But this leads us into what we've been restoring here. And this is a creation by our volunteers, especially Paul. Paul's going to be running this operation, and what we transformed this space that we earlier talked about, that used to be a berthing apartment, into what we have now. So come on in, we'll show you. So as you can see, we've transformed this berthing compartment, which was not really used for anything but staging paint and equipment, into a modern day 3D printing shop. Now we can scan, lay out, change the design, and make things that we can no longer get. Now the idea behind this is that we're a World War II ship, and ships that were mothballed have been disappearing over the decades to the point where we cannot get spares anymore. So how do we alleviate that problem of restoring a ship? Now granted, they're not going to be up to spec, but for aesthetic reasons, a lot of the stuff that we can produce here in a 3D printing lab can go out and restore the ship so that people can actually see and be educated and see what it was like this ship was. So we'll take something, I'll let Paul explain how we're going to do this, but we can get into the point of restoring the ships bit by bit, little piece by little piece, because we can 3D scan, reproduce, and mass produce. Light switches, control boxes, you name it. We even have, we're looking at what's called a 1MC, or I should say, Captain's Bitch Box is a nickname. But we've lost these over time. So we can't produce these things anymore, the true ones, but we can actually reproduce piece by piece and build these again with 3D scanners. So equipment like this that we can do, get the box, we can make them, fabricate them, either 3D or simplistic boxes with steel, and then the components that we're missing, switches, light bulbs, holders, we can start reproducing and then putting the ship back together. So that way you can see what a World War II battleship was like. And with that, we can help other museum ships with their problem by producing this and providing the information. If they want to print it, or they can ask us to print it if we get things up running into a good, smooth basis. So we can actually help the rest of the fleet get what they need. Bigger things as they come along, but with any race, you start trotting before you run full-fledged. So right now we're trotting, getting everything laid out. We're gonna stop over here, and I'm gonna let Paul come on in, and Paul's gonna go and walk through all the components and how he's running his shop here. So Paul, why don't you come on in?
Hello, I'm Paul Scalabroni. I'm one of the lead volunteers here at Battleship Cove. I work closely with Tom, and he just explained to you the functions that we're going to have in the lab here, so I'm going to get a little bit more into the technical details of what we're going to do in the lab. So if we want to come this way, I'll rejoin with Tom. So basically, for anyone that knows 3D printing, we're going to have two processes we work with here. It's what's called FDM, fused deposition modeling, and SLA, stereolithography. One uses resin, one uses filament printing. So depending on the needs of what we're doing, if it needs to be a stronger part or if it needs to be a transparently clear part for a lens, we have different processes we can go through to do it. We also have different sizes of printers. We have everything from a small printer like a Robo here, which does smaller parts around 10 inches to 12 inches in a cubicle space, all the way to something that we'll show you in a second, which is our GigaBot printer that was donated to us, which can do almost a 3 foot by 3 foot cube. So that can print very large parts for projects that we have planned for the future. This is an example of what would be one of our resin printers. It's a Elegoo Mars, fairly low cost, but actually a fairly useful printer for what it can do. And again, all this equipment's either been donated or acquired by us over the few months that we've been planning this project out. So this is all pretty much a volunteer project at this point, donated to the Cove. But we have all our monitors set up. So Tom was mentioning the 3D scan capability. So we have the ability to hand scan, or we can actually use a turntable to scan any objects we want. One of the examples being the intercom box Tom was talking about. A speaker grill like this is almost impossible to hand model because you would have to literally try to create this whole grid of circles, which you'd go insane trying to do that. So we can 3D scan this in minutes and then have a part that's already ready to print. We just have to clean it up a little bit and then add it to the pieces that we're going to be making for the actual box itself. And then we have a fully functioning box that we can reproduce and put anywhere on the ship that we need it to go. One of the other projects that we've been working on was a couple weeks ago we took a trip down to the USS New Jersey. One of the ever-going problems we have with our 5-inch batteries on board, because we actually shoot them, is the...
For saluting purposes only. We're not trying to target anybody here, but they can't fire projectiles just for a safety feature. They can't because the barrel liners are so contorted that it's self-destructive if you ever try to find something real, but we use them as saluting batteries.
Yeah.
But to keep them going, we need parts.
Water gets in the barrel and it gets down to the breeches and actually causes a problem where the breech tends to freeze up. So we need to actually remove the breeches. But you need a special tool to do it, which we didn't have. The USS New Jersey did, so they invited us down to actually 3D scan the tool that they had, which is literally, this is it right here. It's just their version's a metal cylinder. We 3D printed one so we can send it off to a machine shop to be recreated. But we 3D scanned it, then I drew it up in CAD to make sure everything was dimensionally accurate. We printed it on one of our printers, and now we're going to send this with the STL file off to the machine shop. They'll recreate it in steel for us. We'll have as many of them as we want, but also other ships that don't have that tool will be able to get one off of us, or we can send them the file if they have a local machine shop, and then they can print it up themselves as well. So
the idea is to preserve it and use it functionality. So this is just a prime example, like a dogging wrench or that. This is a great one, but tools like this.
It's a prime purpose of why we have this lab running is a tool that we don't have and they only had one of. We can now preserve the original, create a new one that we can make as many of them as we want. And all we need is this equipment to do it and a machine shop to make it in real life. And all these files are going to go into a database that we'll have available for any other museum ship that wants the files. They'll be available free of charge. We're not going to charge for the files once we create them. If they have a printer on board, they can print the file. If they wanted us to print the file with a bigger machine that we have, we'll do that. It's just probably going to be the cost of whatever materials and shipping would be to actually manufacture the parts. But
so the whole fleet benefits from this. It's not just us.
Exactly. There's other ships that use 3D printers. I believe the Kid has a printer on board where they were starting to do smaller parts, but we're trying to do it in a actually mass manufacturing scale where we have a capability that if you had a large item, we can make it, because larger printers, as we'll talk about with the GigaBot, are not cheap objects. These printers are fairly inexpensive. The most expensive one, when these were brand new, were about $800. The Elegoo is about $300. Our GigaBot is a $15,000 printer, which if we had to buy that, we wouldn't be able to on our own. So luckily we actually had one donated to us. So it allows us the ability to create huge parts, and that's a massive, massive benefit to us. So actually, if you want to head over to that, we'll show you that one. So this is our pride and joy. This is the GigaBot 2. So printers like this are basically industrial use. It actually uses a larger filament. It's a much larger scale printer, but it's designed to print parts that you wouldn't use as a hobbyist level printer would do. So it's going to create the ability for us to, one of the things we have is we're missing a lot of our firing computers down in the plot room. And you're talking, it's about the size of a small compact car. But if we actually chop it into sections and we 3D scan it, this has the ability to print it in large chunks. We glue them together. We give it a good paint job. You'll never know that that thing was 3D printed unless you actually lifted it up, because it's going to weigh a lot less than a real one.
Right, because a lot of spaces that we have, you're not going to be able to get into, but just to get it aesthetically set so you understand the functionality and the size and the restrictions, it's teaching as well what life was aboard this battleship. So, like I said, parts we cannot find anymore. But if you find anything that we may use, let us know. We can surely.
Because it's the little nuances that set these spaces off. When we restore space, it looks nice to be in paint, but it's the details. These switches, that little brass nubs, the box covers for receptacles, all these little things that either are lost over the years or they grow legs because they're easy to carry off the ship. So
something is we want people to know is these ships are here for your education, preservation, and our future. We don't say you should do that, but things that have gone over the years because other ships have come and taken parts over the past and trying to replace them is a big driving force behind the 3D printing problems.
And it's also parts we've never had. Hello.
Greetings. Depart. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
You want to be on camera. So, again, parts we've never had. Dogging wrenches for hatches that the Navy probably would have took with them when they gave the ship over. Valves in the engine rooms that were removed because we didn't need them for safety reason. Gauges that were removed. So all those parts, they don't need to be functional. They just need to actually have the appearance that they're there, so we can reproduce those and actually make the exhibit look like it's a complete exhibit without it having to actually be a functional exhibit.
Right, because if these ships are ever taken back and restored, all that equipment will be replaced anyway with new models.
Right, it would be modernized.
So we wouldn't have to worry about that. Right now, we're worried about preserving and presenting the fleet.
But also from a volunteer standpoint, if you have skill sets in this kind of a field, 3D modeling, operating 3D printers, CAD design, basically we can use people like that now, because it's not just you see a ship and you don't think you're going to be chipping or painting or welding. There's actually a high-tech requirement that we need for people on these vessels now, because we're trying to bridge the two worlds together. This is a high-tech world that's also helping out an extremely low-tech world of a battleship. They actually have a really good merge in technology where we're going to start doing a lot of series on this in the future, where we'll show you how we scan this part, how we turn it into a model, how it goes to a printer when it's printed, and where we actually install it on the ship. So you'll see the whole process of it, not just, we have a 3D printer, let's make a benchy, and then there we go. It collects dust and doesn't get used again. We're going to make these printers work and earn their keep.
And also be able to teach people how to do the 3D printing process, because my generation, this is all new to me, and I'm still catching on to the little tidbits of it and learning as we go. So it's a teaching tool as well. This shop will be able to use, and one of the major reasons why this printer was donated was that we can use it for education as well amongst our volunteers and other people.
And the overnight program. One of our biggest claims to fame is we have a lot of Cub Scout groups that come and spend nights on the ships. So in limited quantities, we can actually have them tour this space and actually see what a functioning lab looks like that actually creates usable tools using modern technology. Or some of these printers are portable enough that we can actually set one up in the wardroom and show the whole group of kids what a 3D printer is, how it works, and the parts that it produces. So it becomes an educational tool and creates another draw for our overnight program. Hopefully that will get people to want to see that side of it as well.
Fascinating and outstanding how one small little space can turn into something so functional and so needed in today's museums, and how we can go about it. It's not original completely, but when you can't provide that, we can get as close as we can. It's like restoring your Corvette or Mustang. You're not going to get all original parts. You want to, but you can't. But you settle for what reproductions you can to bring it back, so you have the atmosphere and the ability to teach visually and physically, because now you can touch it.
And also from a standpoint of helping out the ships, if you have any of this equipment and you wanted to donate it to the Cove, again, this is an ever-expanding project. We're always going to be adding printers to this. Whatever ones I can afford to buy, I usually will bring in and we'll just use them here. But if you have 3D printers, or if you want to get involved with the program, contact our volunteer coordinator and actually get involved. Donate material if you have material, donate your time if you have your time, because we have an infinite use for this kind of manpower. And it will go to help not just our ship, it will help every museum ship out there if they want to embrace the technology.
As well as other museums, not just ship, aircraft, and other things.
Yeah,
We're all
it doesn't
learning
have to be
and
naval.
teaching from each other. So this is something that can transcend through history and preserving not just a fleet, but American history as well as world history. So what else we got, Paul?
That's pretty much it for this right now. The next set of videos we'll send out will actually be us taking you through a process of a print. We don't have anything running right now, so I can't show that, but we'll get there.
Fantastic. If you noticed here in our shop, we still use a lot of things here. I wanted to point this out because this is an interesting little thing. You may have seen this in the 16-inch gun magazine video we did earlier. This is an ammunition stool. It's portable, it folds, it's aluminum, it's non-spark producing. These haven't changed in about 100 years. They're still putting them on ships now. So a rarity is to find one on a ship. It's still intact and usable. But it works great for a bench. We're going to clean it up and put it back in a magazine one day, but for right now, it's good. So there's a little bit of history here as well. A little bit gunner stuff. Some of you gunners out there, you recognize this thing, pain in the butt. Yeah, we've been there. You know the story. Thank you much for everything you do here, Paul. This is one of the most outstanding projects. We started out cleaning and painting a space to get it set. We didn't want to tell you, but we wanted to surprise you and show you what
we'll have to post some pictures of what this room was when we started. You wouldn't recognize
go
it.
Through that. Yeah, it's just amazing what you can do when you get a good team of volunteers. And we're always looking for volunteers to help. So stay tuned. Keep watching. Like, share, subscribe. We're always trying to make life better here, preserve your history, because this is part of the American history. And preserving it, it's its own battle. That's a continuous process. So thanks again for tuning in. We hope you liked it. Let us know. And come on down. And in time, you'll see more. So stay tuned. Check back with us. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Outstanding job. See you out there. Take care, shipmates.